And we are back once again to talk about another JRPG, because this is JRPG month, and I have two guests with me today. I have Erek Ladd from Retro Game Remix and the Breakfast of Champion podcast, a man who likes talking about breakfast, games, coffee, this, that, and the next thing, and Steam Decks, because he's one of those lucky people who has one. And we have James66GD from the Review Ting, who is a big JRPG fan himself, and so is Erek. So I wanted to get these two lovely lads on to talk about one game in particular, my favourite game of all time, which is Final Fantasy VII. And today we're going to talk about the past, the present, and the future. Check you with your big sword. Ring.
Got it out just for you. I got it out just for you.
So I wanted to break this down into three sections, as I mentioned previously: past, present, and future. So I've got it bullet pointed, and the first point I want to talk to you about is actually what pulled you into Final Fantasy VII. So I'm going to start us off here. So what pulled me into Final Fantasy VII, being the greatest game of all time, let's just put that there now, before anyone says it's not, it is. When I was young, we had a PlayStation 1, and the adverts on TV were coming out with Final Fantasy VII. Now, you'll remember the big adverts which are going across, all the cinematics, etc. Now, my dad bought Final Fantasy VII for himself, and I think he only ever played it once, and that was basically like the smallest part of Midgar. And then me and my little brother basically took the game and played it from there onwards. So that's what pulled me in, was those cinematics, really, from seeing it on the TV and then seeing my dad actually playing it and me going, I want on that, let me play. So what actually started you off playing this game? Was there anything that basically made you go, right, this is the game for me? Who wants to go first?
James, you go.
Okay, so with me, when I was younger, I only ever had a Game Boy. And then one day, my grandparents were kind enough to take me out, and they gave me the option of N64 or PlayStation. So I'm a big PlayStation nerd, so if you didn't know that, I'm a big PlayStation nerd. So I got my PlayStation, and at the time I only had a handful of games, and then my brother also had a PlayStation 1, but he was getting really big into the sort of Dreamcast, so he basically didn't want his PlayStation anymore. So I inherited his old games. They sold the system, and lo and behold, one of the games that was in there was Final Fantasy VII, the greatest JRPG of all time. And yeah, it just kind of worked out that I had a lot of time to sink into a game, and that game saw me through the best part of about 3 years. I literally did everything you could probably do in that game.
It's a long playthrough.
Well, yeah, literally every day coming home from school, I would sit and I would just get completely absorbed into the story and just the characters and just the lore and everything that is Final Fantasy VII. And that's why it's one of my favorite games of all time, because this was probably the game I put most amount of time into ever. So yeah.
Very good.
Nice.
Final Fantasy VII for me is an interesting one. I grew up with the N64, and then I transitioned over to PlayStation 1 in the late 90s. I remember getting my first PS1 and Crash Bandicoot 3. We had that on layaway at Walmart for a couple of months, and then I finally got it, and then we went to our local video rental store back when those were a thing. I remember seeing a copy of Final Fantasy VII on the shelf, because in the US the artwork was different than what you guys had in the PAL region, with Cloud looking up at the Shinra building holding the Buster Sword behind his back, and that was like really cool to me. So of course, back in those days when we would see cover art, we'd be gravitated towards that. Looked cool, I rented it, and I was completely hooked. I remember I didn't own the game for a little bit. My parents finally bought it for me after a little while, but like James, a better part of my childhood I just spent Not really doing anything specific. Like I kind of got stuck midway through like the Wutai side quest. I couldn't figure out how to actually get out of Wutai as a kid, so I never beat the game as a kid. I only beat it like recently, like as in like 5 or 6 years ago for the first time. But yeah, it's just the characters, the lore, the music, the story as well was a really complete thing for me, even though I hadn't played the game. And of course there was Advent Children and all that. So Final Fantasy VII was just really cool on a surface level, but the older I got and the more interested I got in the JRPGs, the more I realized that this thing is actually like the blueprint for a JRPG masterpiece, and I've been hooked on it ever since.
Very tidy answer there, very tidy. So you're talking about there, obviously, the story, etc., and you going back to it years later and actually completing it. Do you, any of you, have any specific memories of your time with Final Fantasy VII? So I'll give you an example for myself. With Final Fantasy VII, the thing which always sticks out to me the most is actually the Midgar section of the game. That is, strangely enough, that is my favourite section of the game. Now, I'll tell you for why. When you complete the Midgar section and the open world is shown to you, right? I have never, at that time, experienced something like that before. Because I played games like Crash Bandicoot, you know, you just, that's just a platformer. But when you go, you know, you see this cyberpunk sort of city, and you think, wow, this is on a massive scale, this looks grand. And then you leave the city and you're just, this whole world opens up that you never knew about. That is one sticking point to me, and that world map music kicking in for the first time, phenomenal. So again, I'm going to ask the question to yourselves: do you have any firm memories of Final Fantasy VII when you first played it, or just whenever?
Okay, so for me, there are two major parts, and I will say one is going to be triggering for a lot of people. Right?
I know the one.
So everyone talks about it. Everyone talks about it. It's the part where Aerith gets killed. She gets murdered by Sephiroth.
Oh, the shit!
Spoiler alert!
Spoilers everywhere. If you haven't played the game at this point, then you're doing yourself a disservice. But that really, really, really bothered me when I was a kid, because, you know, you go through the story with this character and you sort of grow to love them and sort of want them to help you, you know, get through the whole, you know, avalanche, you know, rebel thing. And then she gets murdered. So that really affected me. So that's a memory that I'd rather not have, but you know, it is what it is. But the one that I would say is probably one of my favorite memories. So back in the day, I used to have a TV video combo, and my PlayStation 1 was linked into that. So I remember I got really excited because there's a scene in the game where you ride a motorcycle.
Oh my god, yeah? It's me too. You taped it. I did the
I
same.
taped it. I legitimately taped it. And also I had saved just before that part as well. So I would constantly watch back on VHS my playthrough of the motorbike scene just to try and figure out where I could get better and you know, really master that part of the game. And then, like I said, I saved it just before, so I would play that over and over and over, and I probably put maybe 250 hours into that. That's maybe out of the 3 years that I played, there's probably a good 250 hours that I put just to that little segment. I don't know what it was. I think it was the music. I think it was just the whole intensity of playing that. I loved it. And like I said, I would record myself playing that bit, and I'd be like, oh, I need to do that bit better. And I'd go back and, you know, do it again and really mastered that part of the game. I absolutely adored it. So that is probably my favorite memory from Final Fantasy VII.
It's a really great part of the game, man. Honestly, that like John, that Midgar section, that exposition part of Final Fantasy VII, to me, is the best part of Final Fantasy VII, because it sets up the characters, it sets the stage for Cloud, becoming a mercenary that's a little bit more fleshed out in the remake, and I like that they've given a lot more life to Midgar in the remake. But the original one, even though it's a shorter, like encapsulated into like maybe 5 to 8 hour portion of the game, I still think it's my favorite part of the game too. But more specifically, I really like when you raid the Shinra building and you're held up in the jail cells and you wake up, the doors are open, there's all the blood on the ground, and you realize like Sephiroth is back. And that really ominous music was just, it was awesome. And I feel like that was one of the parts that they kind of dropped the ball on in the remake. I feel like it could have been just a little bit more scary, a little bit more true to the original. That was really cool. And plus, you know, James, like you, I recorded that the motorcycle chase graphic on my TV VCR combo. I remember saving and then going and doing the fight with Rufus, and then of course after that you do the motorcycle chase sequence. And I watched that again and again and again. So I'm glad I'm not the only one. So Midgard, very iconic.
I still love as well the little bit before it, the little sequence, the little video sequence with him like flying out of the building on the motorcycle.
So cool.
I still enjoy watching that.
You played that bit so much you thought, right, I'm going to record this as a song and put out in vinyl as well.
Something like
See,
that.
I was going to plug it somewhere. What's funny, right? Going back to the Aerith getting pierced, put it that way. I remember getting so enraged by that because when I had my first ever game, I thought she was Ace. I remember you could change the names of the characters, right? So I never had Cloud as Cloud. My Cloud was called John. and my Aerith was called Flower. And I remember, she got minced, and then I had been building her up as a character because I thought her limit break was Ace because she could heal people. Now, I never played JRPGs at the time, so I was like, oh, this is great. You know, if she has this limit, she'll heal us. And then she gets destroyed. I'm like, oh, who's going to do this now? I remember going downstairs to my mum. I remember going downstairs to my mum and going, oh, the Flower just got killed. And she's looking at me going, what are you on about? But, okay, so that is the past of Final Fantasy VII. But let's bring it up to now, or the most recent present. And we have now had various ports of Final Fantasy VII. Eric, you've actually done a stream recently. You did a playthrough on Twitch where you actually modded the game. But what I want to talk about is this bad boy right here, Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, I want to get your thoughts on the remake in general. What, you know, how you thought it was compared to the original. So let's just have a roundtable discussion here about your thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Remake. So who wants to start us off?
John, you go. Sorry, James.
No, I was just gonna say the one thing that I would say about this entire thing is haters are gonna hate. You are never gonna please a lot of the fans because there is a dedicated base of Final Fantasy VII OG fans out there, and haters will definitely hate. I loved it.
Yeah, I mean it's
shake it off.
Final Fantasy VII is a culture defining game. Like it literally spearheaded JRPGs into mainstream, and that's the reason why we have so many games now that are accessible for Western audiences, because so many people clung to Cloud as a character, and you know, the character design and all that stuff. And that's why it's still as popular today. Of course, the tech demo for PS3 came out at like 2000 something. I don't know. Yeah, and then people were like, "We want this," and they finally brought it back. So 7 years ago now, they did the teaser, and you know, they released the remake part 1 2 years ago, and then we're still waiting for that. But I really enjoyed it. it was a great game. Of course, it's not a complete experience, and people, like you said, haters are gonna hate. But I mean, for the turning an 8-hour portion of the game to like a 20-30-hour adventure, it was really cool, and I'm so glad that I got to experience that in my lifetime. Like it's honestly such a treat for me as a Final Fantasy VII fanboy.
Yeah. With Final Fantasy VII Remake, I remember because you're talking about when they had the teaser trailer come up, and that was E3. I can't remember what year, but I remember the morning it got announced over here, because I checked my phone whilst getting ready for work, and I was still living with my mum and dad, whilst my wife was living with us as well, whilst we were saving up for a place. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, I see this trailer, and I literally went, "Yeah!" and she turned around to me and was like, "What are you doing? Calm it!" Anyway, the remake in general, I have done 4 playthroughs of it, with this being my favourite section of the game as well. I was like really happy with it. The action-based combat in it, with the tactical aspects, with the menu screens, etc., I absolutely adore it, and it's one of these systems where it's easy to master, because you can get some builds in it, and every time I've played in it, I've always found different ways to load up the characters. So one of the best pieces of materia, for example, is when you do a roll, you hit a button and they come out like doing an attack. So for example, Cloud will do a front roll and then spin round with his sword. I didn't know that in my first playthrough, and also another chef's kiss with this game is the soundtrack. Now, you can all agree with me that it is phenomenal. The best piece in it for me is the Airbuster fight, when the boss music from the original comes on, but it's got the guitars and the double kick drum going mental. So overall, yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy VII Remake was worth the time. It was definitely the best idea for Square Enix to bring it back from Cyber 2 Connect and do it in-house. So yeah, it's a phenomenal game. Absolutely adore it. It is my favourite game on the PlayStation 4/PS5. I've said plenty of times, my PS5 is a Final Fantasy machine. So
I agree.
Any other thoughts on the remake or anything else anyone wants to say on it?
The only thing for me is the battle system and all that took me a little while. It took me a little while to get into. I don't dislike it, but being a massive fan of the original and just being a fan of turn-based in general, that took a little bit of getting used to. But once it clicked, my god, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought the ATV system was amazing. Can we just quickly say as well, the limit breaks in this game,
Great.
boy, I am like legitimately in love with these limit breaks. They're incredible. It's just, yeah, I love it. I love that you see Shiva, you see Ifrit, you get all the classics. I love it.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
I was really worried about if it was going to be too Kingdom Heartsy, but I think the way that it was executed was done really well. And not only that, it allows, again, like I said, because they're fleshing out this Midgar section, it allows them to flesh out the characters in a way that we haven't seen yet. And plus, the reason why I like Final Fantasy X a whole lot is because of the voice cast. And now these characters are voiced in a fully playable game, so that allows you to get more fully immersed in the characters. So, like, there's a point where you have to save Marlene, Barrett's little girl, and I think it's like Aerith goes into the bar while it's on fire, and like there's this seeing like this little girl cry. Of course, now we're all dads. Like, man, I was like bawling my eyes out just because of the way that I had an emotional connection to these games, or growing up, but even more so now. So absolutely. I just think they really did it justice. So I'm very keen for the next portion of the remake series.
I will totally agree with you on that part. with the Marlene section
Yeah.
because it's been I play it upstairs whilst my wife's downstairs. I'm no joking. It's been times where I'm like. The other question I do have, because you brought up a good point, was the voice cast with this, right? So I thought the voice cast, because it's a brand new cast compared to what it was with Advent Children and all the likes of the Kingdom Hearts games where Cloud was voiced by, I think it was Steve Bloom. So I mean, what was everyone's thoughts on the voice changes, voice characters in general? And I'll throw in a bonus question here as well whilst we're talking about it. Is the actual slight changes to the story? We're definitely going to have to put a spoiler label on this video.
Absolutely.
So I thought the voice cast in this was really good. The guy who played Cloud, I thought completely nailed it. I thought he was you're always going to have some sort of not anticipation, what's the word I'm looking for? You know the word I'm trying to say. There's always a bit of worry of what the change is going to be like, but once you've heard him in the demo speaking, and the way that Barrett was presented as well, because I think the voice artist for that was from Cowboy Bebop, I want to say.
The original voice, he was Jet from Cowboy Bebop, and that's the only voice I ever heard Barrett as. But now they have John Bentley who's playing Barrett now, and I think he does a pretty good job. And it's difficult for Barrett not to be playing a stereotypical Mr. T voice, and I think there's moments where he does have those kind of tendencies, but I think it's done tastefully, and it's still like iconic Barrett.
You're not Merc.
Come on,
Snake man.
Come on. Yeah, I love it. And I also think they nailed like the Jesse and the Biggs characters as well. They so definitely sound how I envisioned them sounding. Do you know what I mean? They had that sort of like geeky, like almost not high pitch, but like borderline high pitch sort of sounds. It's great. So
it's when Wedge starts speaking, and you're just like, it's Badger from Breaking Bad.
Yeah, it was great.
So yeah, and the other question I had there is the actual changes. So the plot ghosts, as they are called widely on YouTube, and fate, as Nomura likes to deal with fate and all that. Any particular thoughts? Did you see it in a negative light? Did you see it in a positive light? What did you think?
Initially, I would say that I was quite negative about it, to be truthfully honest, because not my Final Fantasy, all that kind of jazz. It was. It totally was.
Not my Final Fantasy. Girlfriend.
Don't be messing with my Final Fantasy, son. No,
disgusting.
It's disgusting. I was really apprehensive about it, to be truthfully honest with you, but I went in with an open mind, and I think that's what a lot of people didn't do. So when a lot of these changes happen, it was a bit like, oh, okay, what are they going to do here then? How is this going to play out? How is this going to play out differently to the original? Because obviously, like we say, in the original, Aerith died, and then we get to the end of this one, and it's very much like, okay, there's a thing. Plus, there's the end scene, which I won't go into because there may still be people that are playing through it, may not want to know. But that end scene of the game.
Hold on, you spoiled Aerith getting minced. Why are we worried about this?
Because people might be more interested in playing the remake over playing the original, because
Okay.
But all I'm going to say is the end sequence left a lot of unanswered questions. And to be honest with you, that excites me to see the direction that they plan on going with this, because they have deviated from that normal path in such a way that the possibilities are endless. They have opened up the floodgates now, and anything's game. Basically, anything is game. There is no path to follow anymore. I think they've allowed themselves to explore a little bit wider than what they would have done if they just followed it as a carbon 1-to-1 copy. So I'm excited for that now, though. I'm excited to see if they do it justice and they do it right.
For sure. The Ghost, when I saw them, I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. I just thought this was going to be Tetsuya Nomura doing another Kingdom Hearts thing where, you know. But I think the Ghosts represent Fate, which represents the original timeline, trying to preserve the events of the original game, and the characters are defying Fate, therefore defying timeline. So that's a way for the developers to sneakily break that canon that we know, and then kind of shoe in some other things. So this is kind of like a spoiler alert, but I think those of you who have played the game may have, thought about this in retrospect. But I think the characters, at least two of them, I think Aerith and Sephiroth, either they're aware of previous events through the live stream, or they're just the same characters but just in a different timeline. Two of those people that are in the story now are aware of events, and they're trying to alter that timeline. Hence the flashbacks that you see. They're more in depth. They're not shown. They're not as in depth, but the characters, they know previous events. How do they know that? And Fate is trying to stop them from defying that. Hence how we have that extra cutscene at the end of Remake Integrated, or just in general. So that allows the developers to tell an extra bit of the story. I don't think it's going to deviate too much, but I think because now there's different timelines and all that stuff in typical Tetsuya Nomura fashion, I think it's going to be a really interesting telling tale. And if people want, if people are like, oh, that's my Final Fantasy, like you always have the original one. This is meant to be
exactly
a remake. Not just a remake of the game, but a remake of the story, a retelling. Same thing with Rebirth. It's a redoing. They're redoing the game, but it's very well thought, I will say. So I'm very excited.
That's a nice segue talking about Rebirth, because we're going to go into our next section now, which is the future of Final Fantasy VII. So, as you mentioned there, Eric, the next title in the Final Fantasy VII remake sort of sphere is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which we have now seen a small trailer for from Square Enix, which showed the start of the cam section, the flashback to the Nibelheim incident with Cloud and Sephiroth. So, thoughts on this game, where it's going to go, where it could end, any sort of thoughts coming right out at you? I mean, I can easily start us off here with Rebirth. I have been thinking about this the whole way through, since it got released, where is it going to end? Because Square Enix have said, right, there's going to be 3 Final Fantasy VII games, which is great that we now have a total. So I think that the game is going to end when the Black Materia is handed to Sephiroth, and that's when the weapons are unleashed against, on the world. You could have done it from when Aerith gets killed. If she gets killed, see, that's the other point. You could leave it from there, because that basically leaves it at a cliffhanger sort of idea for people who haven't actually played the game before. I think that the cam section is just going to be, I don't think it's going to be a huge section. I think that's going to be your tutorial sort of chapter, similar to what Chapter 1 in Final Fantasy VII Remake was with the Midgar bombing section. And I think that we're not going to have a full-on world map. We're going to have bigger zones similar to the previous game. I don't think there's going to be a world map. As much as I want a world map, I don't think it's going to happen. But my thoughts straight away. I mean, what are your thoughts about the game? What are you hoping for? Just let me know.
I mean, it's difficult to say. Crisis Core, Rebirth we're on, not Crisis Core. I'm not sure how they're gonna go how they're going to go about doing this next section. And I am actually going in with an open mind again. Like I said, they've already deviated from the normal path. There are different timelines, there are different sort of things like that. I wouldn't even like to say, to be truthfully honest, what they're going to be doing. I'm very reluctant to make any sort of assumptions at this point because of how much they threw it out with the remake. I'm excited, and I just hope whatever they decide to do and whatever sort of path they decide to go down with this, they just do it right. And as long as they do it right and they stick to their guns, I don't think we'll be disappointed at all. In terms of like where will it end, I don't know. Could there be some big conclusion at the end where timelines meet, timelines separate, whether was all this just a pipe dream? Is Cloud just going to wake up and go, oh, that was weird? How strange. Do you know what I mean? You don't know. So I wouldn't even like to say. There's so many factors that could be involved in this. There's so many plausible things that could happen within these next few games, and I just don't know. I'm very much like, I feel like I'm very much in the lurch with it. I don't know what to expect, and I don't know where they're gonna go. But they've already shown Zack coming back at the end of remake, so we already know that not only have they changed the timelines, but they're going to reintroduce characters, and they could introduce new characters. They could. There's the possibilities are all over the place. So I'm a bit scatterbrained, to be truthfully honest with you on it.
I think we ultimately know where it's gonna. I know where, I feel like I know where the game is gonna end overall, and I feel that it's gonna end in the same spot. But like I feel like the characters will have been on a different journey before ending up there. I know that the game's gonna start off with the calm flashback. Everybody kind of picked that out. But as far as where part 2 could finish, I really don't know. And I'm the second part of the game. For a while we've suspected it's gonna be a trilogy. We've always been worried about the second part because it's like the best part of the game and the most easily fleshable out part is the Midgar section. So from there you have Calm, then you go to like Cosmo Canyon, then the Temple of the Ancients and all that stuff. I feel like that's where the game it loses its linearity in the original game, and that's what allows you to open world explore. I think in terms of stylistically, it's probably going to be more akin to Final Fantasy 15, where it wasn't like a true open world, but it was. I feel like they're gonna adopt that kind of thing. But I mean, like you, James, I'm just gonna be happy to sit and enjoy the ride. Whether there's gonna be certain points where there's gonna be timeline, like shifting to the parallel timeline, with Zack and all that stuff. I think that's gonna be really cool to see. So I don't have any expectations for the second part other than I want it to be good. And I want it to maintain that level of consistency in fun and awesomeness and gameplay and polish that I expect from the remake series now. So, I mean, it's almost 10 years in the making, and I mean, just to get to this second part, I don't know. It can't come soon enough as far as I'm concerned, but I'm very hyped. So whatever happens, happens.
Are you hoping that they put in the parade? He's gone.
Can you tell I really like that song?
I mean,
sorry,
that just go back to areas. I mean, part of me thinks, are they even going to bother putting in some of these areas? Are they even going to, again, this is where I'm coming from, where they've changed the sort of timeline, the story. Are these even going to be part of the path? Do you know what I mean? Is this even what we're coasting towards? Or is it going to be, they're going to introduce completely new areas, or areas that may have been, I don't know, looked at.
I don't see why not
in the original designs.
I don't really feel like they have any reason to deviate from. Well, I suppose maybe they do, but I don't see any reason why they would deviate from the original story. I think the introduction of the alternate timeline, I feel like, is going to be their way of shooing in some changes and stuff because they know that people, like all three of us, are still wanting that parade scene. They're still wanting,
Yeah.
you know, I want to be doing the gun flips and all that stuff. I want to go to the arcade in, yeah, the golden saucer. Why have I forgotten that? I want to do the chocobo races in HD 60 frames. I want to do all that. They know that. At least I hope they do anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'd like them to flash out Temple of the Ancients as well.
100%. That's a really cool part.
That would be an amazing part to do in this modern age.
Yeah.
It would be great.
Okay, cool. There is actually one more game coming out, and one of you mentioned it was Crisis Core Reunion. Now, when this got announced, I remember seeing James getting awful excited.
It's my favorite PSP game. It's so good. It's so good. I know. It's literally that. You know, it was. I mean,
So-
there's a big influence there for me for what it being one of my favorite PSP games. You know, it's fantastic. I love it.
That's
I mean, you want to start showing off?
Here he goes. He's got his PSP.
Here he goes. I got my PSP right here. This is my pride and joy.
Oh.
You know, this is literally my pride and joy. And yeah, that's how much I'm into this game. I cannot wait. I mean, it's just
so cool.
oh, it's such a great story. I mean, Zach. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't. I'm running away with myself here. But Zach
here's
is
the question.
amazing.
So here's the question then. So we've had this debate before, right? And definitively, you're going to get one chance to answer this. Will there be a change to the actual story in Crisis Core? Do you think they will sneak something in to relate it to remake?
Absolutely.
100%.
Without a shadow of a doubt. They're saying no, and I think that's just a complete rouge.
They
They're
wouldn't
like,
spoil it. Of course they're gonna.
No. Yeah.
I think that the game's going to be exactly the same, but up until the last cutscene.
Yes.
It's going to be right up until the wire when it joins up with the actual remake, where there's that section with Boyo. So yeah, what ways are you going to be playing it, though? Because I'm going for Switch. So are you going for PS5? You going
PlayStation 5 every time.
Yep. Yeah.
I want that looking as crisp as it can be.
Yep.
And like, I'm not being funny, Final Fantasy VII in any way, shape, or form should be played on a PlayStation system.
Agreed.
That's just a me thing.
Yep.
That's just a me thing. But that is exactly how I will always play any Final Fantasy game. I maybe Steam Deck, but you know, I'm talking like.
That was a way to say it.
Maybe Steam Deck, but actually no. It's always got to be a PlayStation controller. It's always got to be a PlayStation system. It's just they're just synonymous together.
Yep.
It's just, you know,
Part of the
like bread and
experience.
butter.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be on brand. I want to enjoy it how I know it to be. PlayStation is the home of Final Fantasy, and that's, to me, that's just where it is.
John, if you want to be a heathen and play it on a Nintendo console, you know, just remember that's
Disgusting.
It's disgusting. That's the company that did Final Fantasy wrong.
They did, yes.
They did them wrong. Not in the sense of the games are bad, but just in the sense of they had their opportunity for Final Fantasy VII to be on Nintendo, and they went, nah, we'll go with Philips. But that's a whole other argument for another time.
You see, I totally forgot about that. So I'm stood here going, what are you on about? And then it clicked. I was like, oh yeah, that time when they were ball bags. Anyway, no, the Switch versions for me, just because I always play Switch more than I do the PlayStation. It's easier for me with ongoing life. So yes, but. Is there any final thoughts before we finish up for today? Anything anyone wants to say? No? Maybe?
If you enjoy Final Fantasy VII music, I highly recommend listening to LIFESTREAM.
Oh my God.
How about
I knew this was coming.
Naughty.
that? Sorry.
To be fair, if you didn't do it, I was going to do it.
It's like my favorite album of this year, so why wouldn't I mention it?
That's great, though. No, it's really good. Check it out.
Yeah, there you go. He's just to come to it now. He's just like,
You just got the music speaks for itself, man. If you enjoy Final Fantasy VII, give it a shot.
Nobuo Uematsu, done in Erek Ladd style, is just
Chef's kiss.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. So I will thank you both for coming on today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I didn't actually think I'd be at this stage getting you two on in general, so it's been awesome. But as always, tatty bye.
Tatty bye.
Thank you for watching the video, and please remember to like and subscribe. Tatty bye.